Chapter 19, June 30th, Chicago, Illinois. The Lyric Opera House of Chicago, formerly the Civic Opera Building, was abuzz with excitement. The majestic limestone skyscraper, erected in 1929, just 6 days after the great 20th century stock market crash, towered over the Chicago River between Washington and Madison Streets. The most distinguishing feature of the building, apart from resembling a gigantic throne, was its colonnaded portico that ran the entire length of the structure. At the south end, large bronze doors opened onto the grand foyer, whose gilt cornices glittered beneath the sparkling lights of Austrian crystal chandeliers and elaborately stenciled ceilings. The magnificent space also featured a floor and wainscoting of pink and gray Tennessee marble and fluted Roman travertine columns and pilasters. The Chicago Landmark had recently celebrated its 150th anniversary, an event that had attracted luminaries from all around the world. One such person was Anna Maria Scuderi, the internationally renowned soprano who had personally donated $5 million of her fortune to the restoration of the crumbling Lyric. Scuderi had dominated the opera world for some 30 years, and in that time had sung virtually all the great roles, earning her the celebrated title of Grande Dame. Of note, her Violetta from Verdi's La Traviata and Loretta from Puccini's Gianni Schicchi were considered among her finest performances. Curiously, she had never, in her 35 years on the stage, sung Puccini's Tosca. Until now. This evening's audience, numbering well over 3,500 and filling nearly every seat in the opera house, had turned out for one reason and one reason only: to hear Scuderi's rendition of Floria Tosca in Puccini's masterpiece. The opera was thought to be one of the composer's most honest and purest pieces of writing. At the moment, the prima donna stood center stage, dressed in a stunning red gown with a décolletage neckline. Swirls of gold brocade looped their way across the woman's ample bosom and upper arms. She was radiant. Her voice was transcendent, her audience spellbound. The second act was well underway. To her right, hidden in the wings, was the stage manager, Brian Lohman, a nervous wreck. The over-solicitous young man had been given very explicit instructions by the Lyric's artistic director to attend to Ms. Scuderi's every need during her time at the famed opera house. Her rider called for 2 air purifiers, yogi cocoa tea, jasmine, and lavender-scented candles, and, curiously, the express wish that no one speak to her directly. This last request was difficult to honor. Lohman had taken over for Margaret Moore, the Lyric's previous stage manager, who had recently retired after 27 years. She had mentored Lohman for months, making sure he understood the internal politics, as well as the various Type A personalities who had graced the Lyric stage. Her parting words of wisdom had been, "Give the sopranos what they want, and with any luck, they'll get what they deserve." Topping this list of sopranos had been Anna Maria Scuderi. To say the woman was difficult was an understatement. Brian Lohman knew this, and yet he couldn't help but feel in awe of Scuderi. To hear her sing was to be in the presence of greatness. She was Maria Callas combined with Renee Fleming combined with Jesse Norman. But still, her temperament had rubbed some people, many people, the wrong way. But Scuderi had no qualms about the divides she created. After all, it was a cutthroat business. You fought your way to the top or resigned yourself to being yesterday's news. Great singers were everywhere. Only a fraction of them had the fierce, uncompromising drive to achieve greatness. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of Scuderi's casting, apart from her having never performed the titular role, was the somewhat baffling fact that the soprano had formally announced her retirement to the music world 16 months ago. Thus, when the Lyric had announced its current season, Scuderi's name was not attached to the project in any way. Instead, making her debut on the Lyric stage in the role of Floria Tosca was a rising star, another soprano named Christina Houghton Stone. It had been major news. Like Scuderi, Houghton Stone was a prodigious talent and not one to be trifled with. Her physical presence was imposing. She stood 6 feet tall and flaunted long, jet-black hair. She was hungry for the role and was, in fact, well into rehearsals when Scuderi had appeared suddenly one afternoon, accompanied by an entourage that included her agent, her lawyer, her personal assistant, and the Lyric's artistic director, an effete impresario, to announce that she would be stepping into the role effective immediately. Brian Lohman had been present that day and had witnessed the moment. He would later, after several martinis and anti-anxiety meds, describe the confrontation to friends as the end of days, a bitch fight that had made grown men run for cover. In the end, however, the elder Scuderi, having far more influence, had gotten her way. Christina Houghton Stone, face flushed and teeth grinding, had left the building, vowing in no uncertain terms that she would ruin the diva or die trying. But she had not come back in a fit of fury. Oddly, she had never returned at all. Her absence left Lohman feeling ill at ease. As the weeks passed, however, he'd convinced himself that the younger soprano had taken the high road and made her peace with the whole sordid affair. The opera world was ever thus. In his most private moments, Lohman would admit to himself that it was the offstage drama, in part, that had attracted him to the business. That, and the tenors. Scuderi had now begun the aria, arguably one of the greatest ever written, Vici d'arte, strictly translated as I lived for art. The audience was captivated, intent on her every word, as was Lohman. An intimate and despairing prayer, the aria is sung by Floria Tosca as she faces the execution of her beloved Mario at the hands of the Baron Scarpia. It was beautiful and tragic. Lohman had tears running down his cheeks as he closed his eyes and listened. Prima donna or no, Scuderi had the pipes. Her voice was simply awe-inspiring. As far as the injustice done to Houghton Stone, it was unfortunate, Lohman told himself, but at the end of the day one had to seize what was rightfully theirs. And this was precisely what Anna Maria Scuderi had done, unapologetically. He could forgive her this hostile takeover. In a way, he rather admired her for it. The diva was getting close to the high B flat in the score. He was mesmerized, nearly forgetting to call a critical light cue. And now she was there, the apex of the aria. She was down center on her knees in a posture of supplication. As she approached the climactic line, Perché, Signore, Perché, Signore, why, God? Her voice caught in her throat and stopped. In fact, everything seemed to stop. She went very still. Her hands, which had been clutched over her heart, fell to her sides. An expression of utter bewilderment appeared on her face. Directly in front of her and below, the conductor stared back with a similarly confused expression. He looked at his concertmaster as if expecting some explanation of what was happening, then back up at Scuderi. The conductor's face paled as he stared at the kneeling soprano. He looked perplexed, as though he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. A deep half-inch gash had inexplicably opened across the soprano's throat, a thin veil of bright red blood issuing forth.